Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel, Mystical Appalachia. And today, I'm going to be talking about the different folk practices, aka granny magic, in Appalachia. Now, when I say magic, I don't want you guys to automatically get turned off or lose interest. Magic is simply just a enhancement of prayer in order to make your life better, in order to benefit you and the people around you, or even your environment. So before we get into the specific practices of granny magic, I would like to tell you where this melting pot of different cultures came from. The first Appalachians were the Native Americans, and they had a basic knowledge of how the land worked and the different herbs that could be used for medicinal and metaphysical purposes. Sorry, got a little tongue-tied there. Now, when the Europeans come over, they learned these things from the Native Americans. They learned how these old ancient mountains worked and how they had a soul. The mountains are more than just mountains. They're a living, breathing organism that has their own divinity. Every single part of these mountains, to the old-timers and also the Native Americans, had a soul, and it was part of something bigger. It was part of divinity because it was creation. So the Native Americans were basically the ultimate stewards of the land for my Christian folk out there. And when the Europeans come over, they had to live not off the land but with the land. And combining that with Protestant Christian beliefs, you get a practice called Appalachian folk magic. Now, there was one more group that I want to talk to you about that came in here and really had an effect on what would now become Appalachian culture and Appalachian folk magic. And they came here in probably the worst circumstances. And that is the African Americans, who came over from Africa as slaves, enslaved people. And they brought with them practices of hoodoo and voodoo, which was their native religion, to the Appalachian Mountains. And this kind of blended beliefs as people talked and got together and shared information with each other. So that is where the whole premise of granny magic comes from. Native Americans, the Europeans, such as the Scots-Irish, the Germans, the Dutch, etc. And then you had the African Americans. One big part of granny magic, like I said before, was herbalism. Herbalism is still very important in Appalachia to this day. And though most people see it as a dying practice, it is still alive and well. My mom and my grandmother taught me a whole lot about herbalism that they learned from their ancestors. The first plant I want to show you, and yes, I'm going to show you some examples, is purple dead nettle. Now, this can be found in your backyard. It has these fuzzy, spear-shaped leaves, and they grow in clusters in your backyard. And these not only have a medicinal use, but they also have a magical use. So the medicinal uses is that they are a laxative. They're good for kidneys and allergy symptoms. But their metaphysical use is fortitude and strength. So putting this in a smudge blend, for example, and burning it could really enhance your strength. Talking more about mental strength, not strength. Anyway, so purple dead nettle, it's a strength herb. It's an herb to help you move past obstacles and things of that nature, but it's also very, very useful as a medicinal herb. And it can be used in a tincture, it can be used in a salve. Really, the sky's the limit with this little guy, okay? The next herb I want to show you is something that I use quite often. This is mullein. Mullein usually grows beside hillsides or beside creeks, and they have these big fuzzy leaves. If you see it, you'll know what it is. They grow up in shoots from ground level to about 4 foot tall, and this is an awesome herb. So the medicinal part of it is loosens mucus, calms inflammation, and fights germs. So this was like the old folks' Germ-X, okay? Other than moonshine, which was also a big part of medicine to the old timers. Its metaphysical uses, though, however, is protection, keep away from evil. So this was not only a magical herb here in Appalachia in the New World, but it was also a magical herb in the Old World as well, with practitioners of voodoo and also different witchcraft and pagan beliefs from across Europe used mullein as almost like a substitute to graveyard dirt, but not exactly a substitute to graveyard dirt. Very powerful herb, very similar to white sage. The next herb that I want to talk about, that I also have an example of, you find these everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. And that is dandelions. These little guys right here. These little flowers that grow in your yard. They're an absolute miracle herb. They really are. The medicinal properties include they are rich in vitamins. Very good for you. Used to treat boils. So if you have trouble with boils, like I used to have trouble with boils, these are very, very useful. And I would suggest making a balm or a salve with this. Used to treat liver problems. Probably used in a tincture for that or a tea. Kidney disease, probably the same thing. Regulates blood sugar. But also, I would like to include, because I am a man of food, these things are absolutely amazing. Fried and seasoned in flour. They are good. Very good. Now, their metaphysical properties include strength, determination, and to overcome adversity. So really similar to the dead metal and the sort of thing. These could also be used in a smudge blend. And also, I would like to add that the roots of the dandelion, when grinded up in a mortar and pestle after being dried, is a great, great substitute for coffee. It's not exactly like coffee, and it's an acquired taste, but what are you going to do, right? Now, another common Appalachian folk practice was the hanging of a straw broom above your doorframe. Now, the reason being with this was that the old-timers believed in evil spirits called haints. And they had a tendency to count things. They had a compulsion to count things, according to the old-timers. So they would hang straw brooms or even brooms made out of sticks or twigs above their door frames so that if the haints come in, they would have no choice but to count every bristle. And because they only came out at night, it would be sunrise by the time they get done. Another thing that I want to point out about Granny Magic is that the way of life for Granny Magic, and also the way of life for just people in Appalachia in general, had a lot to do with the zodiac signs and the moon phases. A lot of times you'll see on an almanac or even on some calendars that they would include the signs, and they would also include the moon phases, because people would plant crops or trim trees or even go out and pick these herbs to these signs. It was very, very important to life, even back then and even now, for people in Appalachia. Very, very important. Another thing that I would like to tell you about Appalachian folk magic or Appalachian folk beliefs and practices is that there was a lot of sayings and a lot of divination. And what I mean by divination, in this case, I'm not talking about tarot cards. I'm talking more about with the weather. Now, my mother always told me that if there was snow on the ground after the melt, then that means it's waiting for another one. And usually she was correct. Another example of this is that if the fog chimneys up into the hollers, then that means that it's going to rain again. If the sun shines while it's raining, it's going to rain tomorrow. If the leaves turn up when the wind blows, that means it's going to rain. And usually, except maybe a couple times, she was correct. And this was stuff that her father told her for years. Now, there's also little sayings like, if you open a knife, you have to close it. If someone else closes it, then it cuts your love. Just little things like that was a big part of Appalachian culture back in the day and even now. When you talk to some of the old folks, they'll tell you, now if you open that knife, you better close it. If not, it'll cut your love. This is also where things like, if you break a mirror, you'll have 7 years of bad luck. Or if you walk up under a ladder, you'll have bad luck. That is also where sayings like that come from. It's the ancestors of the Appalachians, and sometimes even the Appalachians themselves, that came up with these things in order to explain how the world worked. Now, but where did some of these practices, where did some of these sayings, colloquialisms really come from? Well, they came from the ancestors of the Appalachians that were pagan. They were pagan, and they had beliefs in witchcraft and multiple gods and spirits and fairies and things of that sort. Me, myself, I am a Norse pagan, but I'm also an Appalachian who loves to use different practices from my region in order to honor my ancestors. My mother also told me that my great-grandfather, whose name was Walter Cole, used to supposedly pull far from people. Far. And what this means, if you got a burn, such as this one that I have on my arm here, I don't know if you can see that very well, that he would take his hand, run it over top of it, and he would say a prayer. And when he said the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, you could literally see the far come out of it. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, that is the introduction to Appalachian folk practices. And we will be covering these more in depth as we go along, as we do interviews. I will also be showing videos of me gathering some of these herbs and even more herbs during whenever it gets up in the summertime. So if you guys like content like this and you want to stick around and see how far this is going to go, I would love you to press that like button, leave me a comment, tell me what you think, and also subscribe. I'm a new content creator. I'm just doing this so that I can help the people around me and help spread the stories, the truth, and legends about Appalachia. So without further ado, gentlemen and ladies, you all have a great day.